Hello.
Crystallizing Conversations. Today we have with us Kris Olivas, and she is a licensed marriage and family therapist, certified emotion code practitioner that uses many different modalities when working with her clients, including hypnotherapy, emotional freedom technique, also known as tapping, advanced integrative therapy, and crystal bowl and tuning fork clearings, just to name a few. Her mission is to identify, teach, and activate starseeds and lightworkers to their divine knowing. Her practice has transformed to integrate a blend of psychotherapy, shamanic practices, quantum healing, sound therapy, and essential oils to clear all that blocks us from our radiant light within. These blocks can come in the form of limiting beliefs, trapped emotions, ancestral and past life residues, and are often stored in their subtle energetic fields. Kris, thank you so much for being here with us.
Thank you, Iris. Thank you, Jillian.
We're both so excited to dive into this topic. I feel like this is something that a lot of us might not even realize that we're going through, that it's affecting our life. And so go ahead.
I just wanted to say, for those of you who didn't read the description in the show notes, so Kris has so many talents and so many focuses, but when we had our intro, our pre-meeting, it really kind of kept coming back to inner child work and to shadow work. And we've mentioned inner child work in, I think, our episode with Marla, which was a beautiful one, if you haven't checked that out. But I know that this is a topic for both Iris and I, something that we have done, I think, at least individually and with support of others, a lot of in our lives, and being able to really share that with other people, I think is really important. And so I'm so excited, Kris, to have you, someone this is what you do, is you really guide people through this process, because it can be so challenging and it can be really blocking us from living the lives that we want to lead. So I'm very excited about this episode.
Thank you. Thank you.
So before we really totally get into this topic, can you tell us a little bit about yourself, Kris, and how you came to separate yourself from the traditional psychotherapist route and, as you call it, become a therapist gone rogue?
Yeah. So, I've been somewhat a reluctant light worker. I have been asleep for most of my life. And so what happened was I had a physical illness happen in 26. It actually began at the end of 2016, around September. And the Western medicine said that it's eczema, and it was just what I was going to live with. But it was actually much more than that. I had brain fog. I was exhausted. Some of my friends thought I had Lyme. Some people thought I had lupus. It was extraordinarily difficult for me because I'm typically very healthy. Mm-hmm. And so I went through healings. I went through Western medicine, but everything I did made it worse. And they said it shouldn't make it worse. So by the time the end of April came around in 2017, I was desperate. I didn't want to live anymore because it was, it covered my arms and my hands. They were double the size. I was in extreme pain. My fingers and everything was cracked. I had Band-Aids all over me. I wore long sleeves in the summer or in the heat, because I didn't want my clients to be concerned for me, because it looked like severe burns.
Oh my goodness.
And through synchronicities, a friend of a friend, my shaman friend had a shaman friend who showed up to my center. And I ended up being the one who received the Reiki clearing, because we usually were doing Reiki sharing. Mm-hmm. And it was interesting because she said, there were two of them, and one was a woman who I knew who was psychic, and she was a shaman. And after they did the Reiki healing, she just looked at me and she said, "It's in the blood." And the other person said, "Yes, it's in the lineage." And at that point, I looked at my friend and asked him, "Did you tell them?" Because I figured they probably knew. And he said, no. And I showed my arms and I said, I don't know what to do. And so she invited me to come to Peru and work with her shaman. Within a couple of weeks, I bought a ticket, went to Peru for 10 days.
Oh, wow.
And she said, come and do plant medicine with my shaman.
Mm-hmm.
And I knew at that time I worked with essential oils, and that I consider that plant medicine. And so I was very naive in the sense of I'm going to Peru and it's going to be plant medicine. And it wasn't until I checked into it that I learned that it was ayahuasca.
Oh, wow.
Over the 10-day period, I did 6 ceremonies of ayahuasca. And I not only came home cleared of this, and it was a full miracle.
Goodness.
But I was given a message during my journeys, very specific message, that I was here to assist humanity to awaken. And I still resisted. I got back and I didn't know what to say. I thought it was very strange and people wouldn't believe me, the things that I saw in my journeys and what they told me about my past and my soul's journey. And so I just tried to keep going back to normal, but then I started getting visions. And I started getting all these they would be visions to me were like dreams, but you're awake, you're fully awake.
Yeah. Right.
And so those were just coming in really strongly. And I just didn't know what to think about it. And it took about between 1 and 2 years for me to finally it was during a drumming ceremony again in my center. And I had just a vision of something that I thought just blew me away. And my friend said, ask them why they keep showing you the visions. And when I said that, that is when all my guides in unison said, we need you to wake up. So all of that brought me to this place of beginning to integrate into my traditional psychotherapy practice methods that were here to heal the energy bodies in order to, so going back to the journey, the one journey where they said what I was here to do, the message was that humanity was stuck in their thoughts. And they said, and they showed it to me like this, they said they loop in their thoughts. And they said it was much more difficult. They didn't realize to wake up, to wake the one up. And so they said they need to release this energy in order to be light. And I asked the question in my journey, light as a feather or light as bright? And they answered yes. And that's
Very
because,
clear.
yeah. And so that has been what I've been doing ever since, is being guided and led to help clear the energy fields of the density, which is trapped emotions, and the patterns of beliefs that show up in how our life is. So whatever's showing up in our life. And that has been transformative for myself as well as so many people, because whatever I've worked on and that's worked for me is what I keep sharing with others.
Right. That's amazing. So I know when we talked before, you had mentioned, so basically people come to you and they have recurring things in their life that are happening. And then you dive a little deeper, and it a lot of times stems back to their childhood. Is that correct?
Yes, the childhood is typically where a template is formed. That's where the belief system tends to be formed, because the first 7 years, we are like a sponge absorbing everything. But the child is trying to make sense of the experiences. And because you're a child, children, and it's just a developmental thing, children believe things happen because of them. Mm. So if mommy is very stressed out and doesn't have a lot of energy to be present with her child, and she's frustrated with her child for being a child, the child will begin to think something's wrong with them. Mm. And each child would decide something. I'm not good enough. I'm not smart enough. I'm not a good person. I'm a bad kid. Now, if you have a parent who says that as well, then you get it confirmed. Mm-hmm. So the childhood is a very important time. But because we all have to move on in our life, if we can't do anything about it when we're children, mm-hmm. we will leave these parts of us, and I call them fragmented. They will kind of stay stuck in a looping of a belief, but it shows up every time it's triggered in your adult life. So that's where we're looking for what's happening in your adult life and looking at did it happen in your childhood as well.
Before we dive any deeper, just because not everyone is familiar with some of the terms we're going to be using, do you mind, however you define it, some of the phrases we've already heard? So like the inner child work, Lightworker, Starseed, shadow work. We can take them one at a time or all together, however you like. But I just want to make sure, like, as we're diving into this topic, which can have a lot of depth and a lot of layers, that everyone's understanding the terminology that we're using.
Yes. Inner child work and shadow work really are the same thing. The shadow is, and Carl Jung was the one who came up with the term the shadow, but the shadow is symbolically, if you think about it, it typically is behind you and it follows you wherever you go. But as you turn, it turns with you, and so you can't see it. So
interesting.
It identifies the subconscious. The subconscious mind lies underneath, it's sub to the conscious mind. And I believe personally that the more that you explore your subconscious, the more consciousness you have, right? Mm-hmm. Because what happens is, as you see what's in your subconscious, you're conscious of it.
Right.
So there's less and less subconscious, it's more consciousness.
So you're bringing the shadow into the light.
Absolutely. And if you have a dark box and you open it up, there can be no dark. Where there is light, there can be no dark. And so as soon as you acknowledge something, as soon as you can see it, and especially at this time on our planet, we have an opportunity to level up like we've never had before. And that's really been what I'm getting chills as I say that's really been the task at hand, is to help people see what's there. And it doesn't have to be painful. It doesn't have to be, the psychotherapy used to be kind of like this analytical psychotherapy where you're just nitpicking away. It's actually not that. But that's inner child. Inner child is an aspect of shadow work. And inner child just looks more at fragmentations, parts of you that are often children. So your 5-year-old might have had an experience that was so traumatic for your 5-year-old. Mm-hmm. And many people mistake that trauma, because there's little t trauma and big T trauma. Big T trauma, we understand, of course, it's a massive car accident, losing somebody you love. Being physically, sexually abused. These things are big T traumas. Little T traumas are having a parent who is just so busy, a single mom is just so busy trying to make it. She's doing the best she can. She loves you, but she really doesn't have time to hear about your feelings because she barely has time to even acknowledge her own. So those are little T traumas because children need to be seen. And so inner child shadow work. And then when we get to Lightworker and Starseed, there's a book by Dolores Cannon called The 3 Waves of Volunteers. I thought it was fascinating. It's a thick book. She leads, I say that because I'm intimidated by, I like lots of pictures, and thin books. And I found it fascinating because she began to interview people and she's a hypnotherapist. And during when they were in deep trance hypnosis, she started to notice a pattern of people talking about coming from another star system, another dimension. And what she discovered was that there was a call made. There was a call made out into the universes. And what she says is almost every being of light answered the call. And they came here and they incarnated in groups. And so Starseed is a term that is identifying that there are beings here on the planet that come from other star systems. And they have not been here just incarnating and exploring Earth's cycle. They came in specifically to bring light to this planet at a time of ascension. Light workers are star seeds often. It doesn't have to be a star seed, but it's a light worker is a being of light that has a distinct mission they came to complete. sometimes it's a personal mission, and sometimes it's a collective mission for all of mankind or for the animals or the planet. So it can be very distinctly different what each light worker will come for. Some light workers will come here at this time to actually put a wedge into a system to force it to shift. And some people say
I know some people like that.
Yeah, they go into the system and then they go, the system isn't sustainable. Let's shift it. And they're bringing in the new. And we need them some of us don't want to be in the system. We want to be off grid and wait for those system busters to get that work done.
Sit back and relax while everyone else.
Yeah, I'll sit over here and I'll heal the grid system, that kind of stuff. So that's kind of how I define. And by the way, for any of the listeners, I'm open to this idea of what you've heard, Starseed and Lightworkers, because to be honest, it is just how I've come to identify those terms.
And just to clarify for our listeners, when we talk about star seeds, that's essentially previous lives. You've lived a previous life, or some of us even have actual memories of being on another planet. So that's not necessarily an alien being that's currently living here on planet Earth. It's that in a previous life, you were living on another planet, in another galaxy, and you chose to be incarnated here as a human and are living a human life. So I just wanted to clarify that aspect of Starseed. And then, light workers, for me personally, when I think of a light worker, I think of someone that you love to be around, that uplifts. Just by their presence, they're a positive person. They are, they come into a room and you feel seen and heard. That in itself is a light worker. It's someone that's uplifting to others. And I feel like a lot of us, even if you don't identify with the term light worker because it's foreign, if you're into crystals, you are a light worker because you are absorbing that energy. You're getting that good energy and other people can feel it. So whether you acknowledge it or not, I feel like a lot of people are light workers in that way, in the sense of you are bettering yourself as a person, healing yourself, and others witness that and they see that in you and it's inspiring to them. That in itself is a light worker.
I always felt the term light worker. It's like with the term worker in it, it's like, it feels hard. It feels like I have to do work. I'm like, I gotta push this rock up the hill to try to change the world. And it always felt like there was a little bit of density to it. I mean, a lot of people use this term. And I think there's this idea that to be a light worker, you have to be a healer. You have to be a shaman. You have to be a Reiki master. You have to have you have to be working in it. This is your job. This is what you're doing. And I kind of like the term light embodier, right? You don't have to, maybe there's some people you've decided to make that your career path. Sure. Amazing. Thank you for your service. But I think there's something to be said for, honestly, we've got this handyman who's just, every time he comes in, he's just so happy and he loves what he does and he loves helping people. He loves fixing things. It just gives him so much joy and it makes my life easier and he enjoys doing it. And and every time he leaves, I feel so much better. This thing is done that I didn't know how to do. And he's so fulfilled and happy because he got to help and he got to fix something. And I think even that, we don't always have, it doesn't always have to be this esoteric thing. It can be, but I think it's just embodying the light that you have brought to this planet. And I do think for a lot of people that requires doing the shadow work because there's a lot of things that can cast shadows over our light. But I don't think if you want to be a light worker, but you're called to be a painter, it doesn't mean that, or you're called to be a plumber, who knows, right? But you don't have to necessarily be I am a crystal healer to be a light worker. So right. I think that's something that's often a misconception. And I think that's also an issue in the spiritual community is this hierarchy that gets created. And it's, if you are embodying your light, then you're doing your job, right. Unless you're called to something. If whatever you're called to be, that's right. It's okay. It doesn't mean that you're less.
Totally agree. You do feel that, Iris, you do feel that joy around. But light workers, I wrote down like 10 signs that you're a light worker one time, because I started to notice a pattern as people would come in. Because one day, when I was in my center, I said, bring me the light workers. I want to work with them. And that word light worker, because they work with light, embodying it. So yes. I love that, and light embodier. But the idea that how I've differentiated it is that you're absolutely right. We need to have these light embodiers in every aspect of our society. And often they're just like these beautiful antennas of light. They just beam light into the space. And that was the reason in the book, the whole purpose of calling, they could not alter humanity's free will. This is a free will planet. And so the only way to shift the timeline towards like an Armageddon ending was to bring in light. And the only way to bring in light without forcing people, the beings here, was to bring in beings who already held more light. Mm-hmm. But the problem that happened was the first wave. This is a very dense planet, and many of the starseeds that came had never incarnated on Earth before. And so when they came and dropped into this density, it caused a lot of, well, first of all, it's incredibly painful if you're a being of light, to see what's happening here with war and pain and suffering and everything so they became very depressed and angry, and often were medicated, high rate of suicide. So some of the signs of light workers is that they have felt like they don't belong. They want to go home. They didn't feel like they belonged in their family. They were the black sheep. They would drop into dysfunctional homes and then wonder why nobody could see how messed up it was. They often left as soon as they could, or found families that would, that they could connect to. They would find their path. And to me, one of the signs of this light worker thing is this driving need to something. They feel like they're here to do something. They have a strong, and they don't know what it is. And sometimes it's just to be, but they don't even know that's what it is, So I love what you said, because you're right. You don't have to be a healer. And sometimes we need to have a corporate starseed,
Yeah.
Right.
And a corporate, a starseed plumber, and because this new Earth that we want to be on is really one in which is designed, in which we have higher consciousness. So that means that everything that we would be doing would be of higher consciousness, and not just the healers and, the teachers and that. Mm-hmm. But you're right. I can speak to that hierarchy, that sometimes we will move to this higher spiritual connection, but not do the actual 3D work that kind of anchors us in. And like me, that's really why my illness came, was I had so much density in my body. I had to release it. And I was not going to do it because I was up here teaching, right? Mm-hmm. I'm a therapist and I'm teaching everybody. And so I had to have that moment in my life to do my own healing in order to continue to go further into higher consciousness.
Mm-hmm. I think what you said was very potent, in that even if, so far as we're talking, starseed lightworker sounds foreign to you, what Kris just said was that you were born into a family where you felt like you didn't belong. This family doesn't feel like, they're nothing like me. I don't feel, this is foreign, or this, a lot of times it's the family structure in itself, because I've talked to Kris before, and we've talked on, a lot of times starseeds choose families that will basically activate them. It will make them have a very blatant, like, this is wrong. Mm-hmm. And you have to go through all this internal struggle and all this stuff to like do all your own healing so that you can be a light worker. Mm-hmm. But yeah, I think if even if you're not resonating with the starseed light worker terminology, if you have felt different, you have felt that you didn't belong, and you have these recurring possibly themes in your life, which I think we're going to get into a little bit later of how it shows up. But I think that many of us, no matter who's listening, have had traumas throughout our life, particularly in our childhood. And so they've not only shaped who we are today, but how we also perceive the world. So maybe we can dive in a little bit into that and how maybe the different ways that it can show up in our lives of how we need to be healed or healing our inner child.
Yes. I always say the patterns are a really, really important way to know that you're getting a message. So let's say that a person has a pattern of people talking down to her, no matter where she goes, work, her family, on the street, cash register, person up behind the cash register. And this is something she notices all the time. And maybe people will say, like, for instance, relationships, all men are dogs, they all cheat. And they believe that. All men cheat. And you'll listen to it, you'll think, no, that's not true. Not all men cheat. Oh, no, all of them do. Because all the men I've dated have cheated, right? So there's a pattern. That pattern is showing up because it is being reflected from what's within you into the field. Okay, we are energetic beings, and the frequency of the sum total of who we are is reflected into the field. And so if you have a belief that all men cheat, you're reflecting that belief into the field, and the universe source matches it. It answers your call, really.
It's like you're manifesting the thing that you least want.
Absolutely.
Because that's the thing you're focusing on. It's the pattern of your thought process.
Absolutely. And there's a lot of feeling that's happening. It's a thought that keeps pinging the, I'd say impulsive, the field. Now, the thing is, some of us, and this was in my case, I didn't have those thoughts. I didn't have active thoughts of nobody listens to me or nobody listens to my idea, but I was finding this pattern every time I went into group meetings where I could give an idea and they would all ignore me, and then somebody else give the same idea, and then it would be like, oh, great idea. And you're like, I just said that. And so I didn't have that active thought, and that happens to a lot of people. They like, I'm not thinking that, because that pattern happened very young. And so, and this is where we go to the inner child. It happened very young. Or, by the way, when we do a lot of family work or family of origin work, and then you still have the pattern, we look at past life and ancestral, because it may be such a deep groove in your template that you brought it into this lifetime, often because you're going to heal it for the collective. But anyway, so that's often the pattern that you're looking for. You're looking at relationship patterns, but it happens in many more than one situation. Patterns of poverty. For instance, if the family, you look back as far as you can know, no matter how much money people made, they lost it. They spent it. People betrayed them and took it. But you find no matter, you have this great position, you have lots of money, and yet you're broke all the time. That would be very strange, right? That's a sign that there is something there within that's really needing to be cleared, because money is energy. Mm-hmm. And so those are kind of some ideas what you're looking for. So it's thoughts about people.
So it's like physical. So it's really, I mean, anything. It's just really where you're looking at the patterns. So it could be emotional patterns or physical patterns or mental patterns or relationship patterns. Really, it's just when there's patterns that are happening and you're like, why is this happening to me over and over again? That's really when we should stop and say, this is clearly shadow/inner child work that needs to be done.
Yes.
And then we contact you.
Yes. Yeah. And like I said, we usually work with the stuff in the here and now, but sure enough, if it's still lingering, we tend to find past life ancestral aspects to it. And going back to this idea of light workers, one of their missions often is to drop into a family line and heal the lineage.
Yes.
So they'll hold.
That resonates for me a lot.
I just keep wanting to say it. I just keep nodding of like the ancestral. And I feel like I have seen this like through Instagram too. So I know there's more and more awareness around this. But as Kris was saying, a lot of times it's our childhood, but a lot of times it's not. If you can start thinking back to the pattern of your mother and her mother and the mother before, and actually really thinking like, oh, this is something that's been going on for generations. That's generations that we're not only having to process our own healing and our own inner child, but a lot of times there's all these aspects that we're having to heal an entire line in our ancestry of different things that are a recurring theme. And it's just when you actually take the time to sit and think about it, it's like blows your mind.
There's this amazing study, and I will say, so my dad is a veteran, his PTSD with maybe some other things, but definitely has PTSD. He was in Vietnam, and my cousin's wife and I were talking. She's a scientist, and she was telling me about the study, and I'm sure I'm going to ruin some of these details, but she was telling me about the study with mice, and they basically had these white lab mice, and they played this particular sound, and then they electrocuted them, not to death, but very painfully. And they did this until the mice were absolutely terrified. And then they would play the sound without shocking them, but all the mice would freak out like they were going to be killed. Then they never did it again. They allowed the mice to breed. Those mice died off. The baby mice were now adults. They had never heard the sound in their entire life. They'd never been shocked in their entire life. They played the sound. They all flipped out like they were going to be dead. They all freaked out.
Wow.
And it took, and I don't remember the exact number, but I think it took like 5 to 7 generations of never shocking them for the sound to finally stop triggering them. And with each generation, there was a bit less of the flipping out, but it still took generation upon generation upon generation because it literally changes the DNA. So then when you add in not just specific traumas that happen to your family, I mean, I remember like as a kid, I would completely flip out at the sound of helicopters. No idea why, until I was an adult. And I was like, oh, because my dad is a war vet and helicopters meant you were going to die. But as a kid, like they would always trigger me, always, especially if what they were circling, I would have complete anxiety / panic attacks.
Wow.
And being able to understand that now. And so when you add in then, not just the specific ones, but intergenerational trauma, like with whole cultures that have experienced trauma, it becomes really compounded. And I can understand why it can be really, really challenging because you have so many traumas that have been impacted generation over generation over generation. And I think it's amazing that we finally now are recognizing it. Even the government is recognizing that children of veterans have PTSD.
Yeah,
and
absolutely. Fascinating. Thank you for sharing that study. That's incredible.
Yeah.
I'm doing a class on ancestral healing. And
that's
so
amazing.
I'm talking about this being passed down. But I will tell you something. That is one of the reasons I do what you call, like a family chart, but in their psychotherapy, it's called a genogram. And I look for that. And let me tell you, as soon as they start, I have a couple clients, they're sisters, but they're ancestry goes back to the Armenian genocide. I don't know if many people don't know about that, but it was as horrific as the Holocaust, and it happened just during the World War I. So it was literally just about 15 years prior to World War II, and about the same amount, millions of people exterminated. And they have I see them separately, so it's not together, but they have really specific, very weird phobias. Just very strange word. And so, it's just, that stands out to me. But I know this background and I feel strongly there's some kind of link to the trauma, of the family there. But anytime somebody tells me that they have a family lineage through the Holocaust or any slavery, it's definitely worth a look to heal.
I would say we should pause. And if you as a listener are sitting there thinking, I have this weird phobia. I don't know why I have it. but I haven't. Look into that. It very well could be something that needs to be addressed and healed within you that you had no idea.
Yeah.
Call Kris.
I mean,
whole episode.
At 760.
Yeah. Or at the very least, you know, like start to hold space for those, right? Because it is possible to do, you know, I think this is something also that used to be very much a communal thing, right? Where like someone would experience trauma and the collective, you know, the clan would come together and they would like hold space and they would be releasing of it. And that doesn't happen in this society, which is why we need therapists, right? That's why we need these places where we can go and space is held for us, because society doesn't really condone that anymore.
Yes, with so many people waking up right now, they need places like your podcast or therapists or therapists who are doing this type of work, because they're having these knowings. They're sensing. I've had so many people who come to me who's like, "Oh my gosh, I'm so glad there's a therapist who I can talk to about my spirituality. You know, that I feel I believe in these things." And so there's a group of people that are really looking for that. I wanted to add another thing about this, ancestral stuff that comes up. When the light worker comes in and drops into a family, with the agreement, with the, desire to heal the lineage, one of the reasons that light worker made that decision to do so is because by healing the lineage, we heal the collective.
100%.
We heal the field, and that the field in which we are all existing in still holds, if you can imagine, because Earth really is somewhat of a traumatized planet. If you can imagine what this field holds in energy from all the pain and suffering, then and now, of course, all time is now, right?
Right.
When we are healing that, and when literally sending it to God, sending it to source, right? We are lifting off, just like it's, so it's really our bodies are the microcosm of the macrocosm, and this planet is an energetic body. So it's another aspect of healing an energetic body. And it's very, very profound work to do that. It may feel like, I was going to say a bad word. It may feel really bad to be holding that kind of density. But if you're listening to this podcast, think about it this way. You may be here to really heal this for your family and for the collective. And that's why you seem to feel like you're all over the place with these emotions. So that's one aspect of what could be happening.
I will say that's one of the things that has really helped me since I think I had, I don't know if it was from conversation, but I think I really had that realization the first time when my autoimmune illness kicked in. I was bedridden for a year. And I mean, there was a few months of like, what the hell is happening? Like, why me? Like a lot of like the victim mentality, and being able to move through that and get to the point where I realized this is something I signed up for. And this is really hard, and it's going to be really hard. But as I am doing it, I am also making it easier for everybody else who is going through this. Like maybe it won't like completely be healed, but there's knots. And by me shifting my perspective, by me healing through this, by me bringing in more light, all of a sudden those knots are getting untangled and it's a little bit less dense. It's a little bit less sticky. And if someone else is going through this, it's not going to be as challenging for them. And so little by little, we're each contributing to the healing of the entire collective. And so now when I have flare-ups, it makes it much easier. I mean, really, when anything happens to me that's like, damn it, it's really hard and really emotional and upsetting. It does make it easier of like, I am doing this for my own healing and expansion, but through me, my lineage is being healed. Through me, the collective is being healed. And I am a part of a really big, giant, beautiful whole. And my healing actually matters for more than just me. And that has made it much easier.
I think that's
because it has meaning. Because it has meaning now.
Right. I
Yes.
think that's a beautiful way to look at it when we're going through trials sometimes like that. I never thought of it that way because me and Jillian have so many similarities. It's so funny. But I was stuck in a recliner for a year because of my back injury. And I remember we had a neighbor that was across the way that literally every day the firemen would show up to because she had chronic pain and she would drink and pill herself into oblivion all the time to help her through her pain. And for me, I remember looking at her and being like, I don't want to be that way. I'm going to do what I need to do so that I don't end up in that route. But I never like had the conscious awareness at the time of, by doing that, the energy shift that my energy shift was almost balancing the bad energy of where her route was going. And I don't know, that was this whole little conversation right here is already very enlightening for me in that regard. Well, so if you're going through pain and you're not succumbing to it, you're not going down the rabbit hole, you're finding ways to uplift yourself despite it, you're doing amazing work, and we see you and we're grateful.
And with that, I'm curious, Kris, how many of your clients come to you, or like, because I'm sure you work with other people, at the center. And so, I just want to like take a moment and talk, like just chat a little bit about spiritual bypassing, because I think that's something that happens a lot in the spiritual community of like, oh, you're just being negative and like love and light vibes. And I think that's something that can be really detrimental. And I would love to hear your views on that, and what are ways that we can hold space for the light as we're doing the shadow work, as we're doing the hard work.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, it's interesting because when the way that some people wake up is to the higher realm, they wake up to this spiritual calling and they go and they start to move and accelerate, which was kind of my experience. And so if you think of it as the four energetic bodies, the physical, emotional, mental, spiritual, if we have got to a place where we're so enlightened, we understand and expanded our understanding of the cosmic consciousness, quantum physics. If we have not done any work on our physical body, so we're not taking care of the physical body, if we haven't taken care of the emotional body or the mental body, you will get stuck at that level. And what may happen, especially if you're a healer, is part of the emotional and mental body has a big, big part that we must understand. And that is the ego mind, the mind that's judging and comparing. And it has the limitation. It's the part of us that says, you can't do that, don't try. Or she doesn't like you, or she's prettier than you, or, you're never going to get out of it. Those types of things right there. Now, let's just say you've developed a really high, and maybe a following because you're a great marketer, so you've got 10,000 followers, right? And people are really listening to you, but you haven't done this deeper work of how you were maybe treated as a child, in which you started to believe that you weren't worthy. And in order to compensate for it, you're now really demanding full stage, really demanding to have all that. So you're hard to work with, maybe. So what happens is you can only guide and assist others as far as you've come. So now you're at a limited stage. You seem to be very spiritual, but you have cattiness and you talk about people and you don't like this person and you passive aggressively shove this person out of your circle because she shined brighter than you. So those are the things that become problematic as somebody who's very spiritual. Now, let's say you're not a healer, because I like that point you brought up. It's that not everybody has to be healers. So you're doing this work because you're spiritually evolved, but you also notice that you keep attracting partners that are emotionally immature. You just keep partner after partner after partner. You can't seem to find somebody who is really at the same level as you. And that's, again, another way to understand that, have I really looked at my emotional and mental energies, and if I'm not wanting to look at them, that's actually a sign that there's maybe something there you don't want to see. And I can tell you that sometimes it's so subconscious. You just have, I'll give you an example, because I had went to a friend who does breath work here in Encinitas, and I was doing breath. I came there because of a friend, and I'm doing this breath work, and all of a sudden, the rush came of this energy, and it came really fast coming up, and it came so fast, and I stopped it, and I could tell like it just stopped like that, and I could feel like it was this ball of grief. And I just stopped it, and then I didn't know what to think, but I could feel it, right? Well, I never went and did any work on that. I knew it was there. I knew and it happened another time, and I went, oh, there it is again. But I didn't want to deal with it, right? I didn't want to really investigate it. I couldn't trust anybody to see what that is. And so I kept going down the line, and eventually I got really sick. So I believe that if it's important enough for you to do some shadow work and inner child, that you will continue to get blocked in some way.
Mm-hmm. And what is a good way, in your opinion, because it also seems to me with the good vibes only mindset, right? Mm-hmm. Like, I'm only manifesting good things, good vibes only, love and light. I feel like that also comes very much from a place of privilege. Maybe you have less trauma in your ancestral lineage, or from like blatant, I will not go into this. I will not, because there's a lot of fear. From what you're saying, it seems like there's like, I don't want to go into that. So I guess, I don't know how to ask this exactly, but like, how do you balance the not dwelling and like staying in and living in that negative mindset with acknowledging the childhood traumas and the lineage traumas and being able to really delve into it so that it actually can be healed? Because if I know for myself, there's things that I've dove into, and like I ended up actually not having the support system that I needed to really work on it. And I got very stuck for a long time on things, and was very pessimistic and very negative about it, even though generally I'm not a pessimistic or negative person, but I got stuck there. So how do we balance those two things? How do we balance like wanting to embody the light while also investigating the shadow? Is there a way to do that that's healthy? Is there a way to do that by ourselves that's healthy?
Yeah. So the healthy part is balance. So if you look in nature teaches us everything. So harmony, balance is what nature shows us, that there is both. We live on a planet of duality. So spiritual, so we reach a level of understanding of spirituality, accepting that part of us, right? Knowing that exists within us. That's been the hardest lesson, I think, for many people who have worked so hard to get to a place of where you say kind of like that spiritual hierarchy. Mm-hmm. Like there is a certain amount of ego when we get into that state, right? And there's nothing wrong with the ego, because the ego's here with us to stay, and let's just acknowledge it, like, oh, there's my ego. Yeah. I mean, it's like, even like going, oh, is that lighting right on my, like we just have it. Mm-hmm. But it's a matter of what's healthy. Healthy is acceptance of both aspects of who you are, of all aspects of who you are, knowing they are there, making choices to look at it and to work with it, to be able to be vulnerable enough to share it, because so often we don't, like, I can tell you, as for many years, I believed that as a therapist, that meant I had to really be perfect. Okay. That I should have the best relationships, and I should not have had any problems in my life, right?
Right.
That's insane, especially coming from the trauma that I did to get to where I'm at. So I wanted to hide these aspects of me because I thought people would think less of me if they knew that I actually have struggled on many levels. And that is part of where the opening of self to be able to say, I accept me. And that means you have to work with whatever your ego is creating about me if you have judgment against me. So as a spiritual leader, I say what's healthy is know you have ego, know you have stuff, look at it, and be vulnerable enough to know that you're another human having a human experience. You know, you're another being having a human experience. And so you're just like everybody else. And that's what I'll say that, you know, with my clients, because, you know, I've walked the talk. I didn't go back to school to my early 40s. So I had already lived a lot of life by the time I did that. And then finished my bachelor's, went on to my master's. So, you know, I was 44 when I graduated with a master's and 46 when I got my license. You know, so I was already
amazing.
Yeah, done a lot. Yeah. So thank you. So yeah. And I had children, divorce, all of that. So there's things that help us be better, and they're often a crisis.
And I think it's good too to acknowledge that nobody's perfect. Mm-hmm. And it's okay not to be perfect. And it's okay to acknowledge, like, you don't have to shove it under a rug. You definitely shouldn't, because it's going to pop up. It's going to pop up. There's no way to hide it.
The monster's going to come out from under the dog, whether you like it.
Exactly. It's going to show up in different ways, whether it's physically, whether it's emotionally, when you're dealing with your own child, which is how it worked with me and my stepson and raising him, is you can shove it under a rug, but it's going to show up. So you might as well pull back the rug and start looking at it.
I feel like it's the difference between like emotional dust bunnies that you're like, all right, little bunny, let's work together. Or like, if you ignore it, it turns into like a giant dust monster.
Right? Yeah. Totally.
And I'd like to add something too, is often when we suppressed or compartmentalized or put something on the shelf or in a lockbox.
That's me.
Yeah.
So many shelves.
Yeah. It's like, oh, I don't see it. A lot of the times what happened was we did that because when it happened, we were young and we had no other choices.
Yes. You had to keep going.
There's nothing we could do. Yeah, we had to keep going. Now, trust, and that's why going through some guidance to do it, because now we are so much more powerful. I work with the most amazing people. They are very powerful and very amazing people. And so really being able to now go back to it and actually so the inner child work is about sometimes doing a restoring of that narrative that was created and allowing you to have a new story about who you are. So sometimes we have what we call trauma personalities. All right.
Yeah.
And I'm showing up with this personality because I had to have all these defense mechanisms in order to survive. And the true self never really ever got to be formed. That's the work. So we want that true self to be out there because she's shining, he's amazing, he's the leader, he's the divine masculine, she's the divine feminine.
I would love to hear more about like what that process actually looks like when you are working with yourself or working with your clients, the actual like act of inner child work. Because we've talked a lot about it, but we haven't really dived into like what it looks like and what it specifically entails. So we have the restoring. I guess, is there any other parts that you bring into that, or what does the restoring process even look like?
So if somebody has something that starts to pop up in their other work where we start to see there's an age that something happened, or something happened and we go back to the earliest age, typically I'm looking at about 4 to 7, because younger than 4 is not as much verbal. Some kids are highly verbal, so we go to 3. So, but by 2, we don't have a lot of verbal. If things happen to you in that period of time, 1 to 3, they're more somatic. So you have no memory usually. And you need to work with it literally coming out of your body. So we're talking about verbal. So we start to find out that there's something there. So what I'll have a person do is close their eyes, and in their mind's eye, and some people cannot visualize. So if your audience would close their eyes and imagine an apple and then imagine themselves at a young age, you can imagine yourself now and just see if you could just see a tree. And that's your inner eye, your ability to see, like, so you could just throw different things, a little dog walking around the tree. So now you're being able to visualize in your inner mind, and that's where you go. So you are now traveling into what I call a 4th dimensional field, which is the field of possibilities. And that is a place where anything can happen, much like the dream state. So that exists in the now moment. And now you've now brought your past into your now moment. You are working with the now, but you're working with a part of you that is fragmented. So now I'd like you to go back, and if you guys want to do this with me, close your eyes and imagine yourself at 5 years old. And I'd like you to find her wherever she is. She could be at home. She could be in school. Maybe find her when she might have been sad, but if you can't find her when she's sad, it's okay, just for this purposes of this exercise. And I'd like you to stand in front of her and just tell me what you see her do when you stand in front of her. What do you see? And what is she doing?
Do you want to go, Jillian?
Oh, I just assumed we'd be quiet so everyone could answer in their mind. But
okay. Well, I'll just tell you, if you tell me something. So let me just give you an example. What that child does tells me something about its connection to you.
Okay. So for mine, for example, so for mine, she's in her closet because that was like my safe space. So she's in her closet, and I opened the door of the closet, and she did not want to leave the closet. She wanted to stay in her closet.
Yeah. So for you, Jillian, right there symbolically, you're seeing a 5-year-old part that is actually cut off, closed off, right? So we're talking subconscious, that doesn't want to come out. So what I would have you do is fill your heart up with lots of love, lots of love. Just make it a big ball of love energy and send it right into her heart. And then in your mind, just say, I love you so much. You are amazing, right? And so this unconditional love begins the journey towards this part. Some children, like my 5-year-old part was kind of hesitant, almost like a sideways glance, like, what are you doing here? Like, what do you want? Kind of like, why are you talking to me? I don't understand, So there was no real talking to me. So then I would feel like, what's the purpose? So that tells you a little bit about how much this joining is necessary. So you continue to work with this part. Now, sometimes to get her to come out of the closet may require you to say, let's say her favorite thing to do was to ride horses. And you say, would you like to go ride horses right now? And the kid goes, okay. You want to go on the merry-go-round? You want to go play jacks? You do something. You go in the closet with her and just sit there and just keep sending her beautiful love. So I'm going to be guiding the person through what to do depending on what their part does. The next piece, once we get a little bit of trust, because it's trust, you wanting that part to trust you, then we're going to go to a scene, depending on what we're working on. And that scene will be something in which the child was hurt. But we're going to have now you imagine you're now like an archangel is to you, right? An archangel comes in as higher frequency. You are now a higher frequency being to this child. So you come in as love and unconditional regard. And now you're guiding and also assisting So you might be talking to her, explaining to her why the people in the house did what they did. Like sometimes, by the way, our parents, and this has happened, my kids have experienced it with me. The mom I was when they were little is not the mom I am today, and not the grandma I am today. So I'm not that person anymore, but they have trauma from their younger years, right? And so that is hard for us as adults to say, well, there's something wrong. So when you go back to this part of you that remembers it was wrong, you want to either explain, protect, or correct the experience. And by doing so, I believe you provide another timeline in which your younger self can experience what it would have been like had the parent responded to you in the loving way. And that gives this subconscious part of you another reality. And in that moment, who would you be today if that had actually happened? So you could actually shift yourself into another timeline. Well, it's very subtle how these things shift us in the now when we come back from those kind of experiences. I often will have them bring back their child part when they're ready, and then they get to have them hang out with them and talk to them. Not out loud, you're just talking in your mind. And I say, oh, if you go to the grocery store and buy ice cream, have your little girl pick out the flavor, or if you go do something really exciting, a roller coaster, you want to go on a roller coaster? And you're just playing, you're snuggling. I had my 4 and 7-year-old parts snuggle with me at night, just kind of hug and cuddle.
I think it's essentially like we're taking the chance and taking the time to re-parent our younger selves. So whatever was happening then, whether we felt like we were ignored, our voice wasn't being heard, whatever that was as a child, that now we may not even, again, we've talked about it being subconscious. We may not even realize how that's affecting us, the walls that we're hitting as an adult. This is our time to take the time and meet with our younger self and be that figure that they didn't have. I think that's so beautiful.
And especially with, what you even mentioned before, right? All time is actually happening simultaneously. Quantumly, this has been proven. So what I also love about the idea is like, you actually are like, you're the angel that you felt in the room. We actually can shift these timelines, and like their echoes will always be there, but that doesn't mean that the new timeline doesn't become like the present one.
Yeah. And you're bringing them home because of fragmented parts. And so this is the other piece to it. The triggers you feel in the now are often that part of you getting triggered. When you get triggered, look to see what is that message you think is happening, right? And then look to see, when did you hear that message before? And often you'll see that people are triggering you and they're triggering that part of you. That part of you is actually what's hurting. So when you actually bring them home, what you're saying is, I've got this. I've got you. I'm your protector now. And it's okay. Nobody's hurting you anymore, especially if you had people who were, right? I'm in a safe place now, and I have a safe partner. I have somebody here who loves me, and we're not in pain anymore. Right? Because sometimes we're like Eckhart Tolle talks about the pain body. We're constantly reenacting. Well, I believe it's these parts of us that are not healed that are being triggered.
I think that's a good way to look at it, is anytime you feel triggered, like this is bothering me, that is your mirror. It's bothering you. That is your mirror. Go within and find out why. Why is whatever this woman doing so upsetting to you? Let's dive into that. I think that's a wonderful realization for all of us, that when we're feeling that way, think of that as your mirror and going inward with it.
Yeah. And ask this question is, what does that mean? Right? What am I making that mean? What is that? That's about me. Because usually the trigger is something about you personally. Right?
Yeah.
So if somebody talks over you and you feel triggered, there's a message about you. You might say, oh, well, it's because she's so rude, right? I hate people like that who are rude. Well, and that's what people typically will do. Well, if you would just stop doing that. But the truth is, that person can do the same thing to someone else, and they just keep talking. They don't feel anything, right?
Mm-hmm.
The trigger is that and this is an example, what does that mean about me, right? Why am I so offended? When I was little, no one ever listened to me. People talked over me all the time. And now when you do it, that part of me, right, is deeply hurt. And I get angry, right? She gets angry.
Mm-hmm.
And so when we heal those parts of us, when this has happened so many times with my clients, they'll go back to their family of origin. They're like, my mom hasn't changed a bit, but she doesn't bug me. I'm like, yeah. Or they go back and they say, my mom is acting very sweet and she actually is listening to me. That's an interesting shift.
So can you explain to our listeners a few of the modalities that you use to address inner child wounds? I think it's so amazing that you were able to, in real time, show a little bit of how you go about that. But if you could talk about the different ways that in your therapy sessions you're able to help.
One of the ways that I use is a method developed by Dr. Asha Clinton, who's a clinical psychologist, and it releases patterns of beliefs through the chakra system. And so you develop a statement that resonates with the client about a belief or something that happened that they believe is true, right? And by saying that statement out loud, while they move through each chakra system, there's about, I think, 12, the energy of that belief is released. So we go on a scale of 0 to 10. So if, say, somebody says it's a 10 and it's very intense, we work through it to get it to a 0. So that really helps with just patterns and all of the things we've been talking about. Another method is to do the inner child parts work, where they go back to that part and work with it. The emotion code, I'm certified as an emotion code practitioner. That's developed by Dr. Bradley Nelson, who's a chiropractor, previous chiropractor. And it is looking at, he actually had this downloaded to him in terms of this method. And so what you're releasing is trapped emotions. So often trapped emotions can be held from family of origin. Many of us were in families that our feelings were not acknowledged. Our parents did not have the tools. And so we had to stuff or hold or disassociate from our own feelings. And so this releases all that energy. Also, this works with the ancestral past life energies because they can pop up as well. And soul journeys, just basically through my, I just basically go into my mind's eye and I am able to see symbolically a message. It's a message that is given to me about that person through symbolism that shows up in a particular field. And so many different variations of that can happen. And that will often bring to each person an answer and a healing as I discover. Often I don't even know what it means, but the person does. And that becomes profound for them.
So you essentially are channeling messages.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay.
Yeah, it's really, I never thought of myself as a channeler, but it really is what I'm doing. And that came after the awakening, after my illness.
Wow. That's amazing.
For those who aren't necessarily able to book with you specifically, are there any books that you can recommend, or maybe if there's groups online that kind of do things that are similar to you? I guess a combination of like, how can people access this if they're not able to access you specifically? So I guess like books, how can they find a therapist in their own area to work with? Is there like a network that we don't know about of like therapists that have gone rogue? I think just any supportive, I know, something to start, guys, something to start.
Well, the books, there's 3 that come to mind that are really powerful books. One is a book by Michael Singer called The Untethered Soul. Another book by Eckhart Tolle called The Power of Now. The other one by Louise Hay. Let me see, You Can Heal Your Life. And I love that. It's a workbook. I would say that if you're not as spiritual, and a lot of the things that we've talked about maybe didn't resonate in terms of light workers and talking about things on a cosmic level, Louise Hay's book is a really good starting point because it's more practical about, what we all know. And then Eckhart Tolle's book is also another one that would be the next level. And then Michael Singer's would be deeper into our spiritual teachings. I don't know of any groups that are doing that. I know of a couple therapists that are similar to me in my area in North County, San Diego. I'm in North County. They're in San Diego proper.
But you do online as well, right? Like you do online.
I do.
Okay.
Yeah. When I work online, I'm not working. So I'd like to also clarify that as a licensed therapist, I am licensed only in California, so I can't do psychotherapy with someone across state lines. The person has to actually be residing in California. So all in California, I could do psychotherapy with. So I can offer my energy healing and shamanic work as more of a coach, a spiritual coach. And that is something that I do offer people across. And it's just slightly different in that we're working more with these methods in clearing, and I try to stay more focused on that, and deeper work that could be worked with a therapist. I'll actually help them get connected to somebody to work through those pieces.
What are some ways that people can connect with you? Your website? Do you have any social medias?
I'm probably one of the old school people.
That's okay. That's okay.
I have social media, but I don't use it to really attract clients. So I would give out my email. Okay. So my email is kocreatebalance. It's my initials, KO, or Kris Olivas, createbalance@gmail.com. And send off an email to me.
We'll link it in the show notes along with the books.
Yes.
Yep. Perfect.
All right. Well, Iris, do you have any crystal formations that you think would be supportive for these?
Yes, 100%. I just wanted to go through a few of them, specifically for inner child work, mother and child formation. And we link in every single show notes. We link both of our encyclopedias, whether it's the stones or the formations. So if you don't want to have to write all this down, same with the books that Kris just discussed, check the show notes. But mother and child formation, it's essentially a formation where I consider you put your ring finger and your pinky finger together. That's what the points look like. And it's really going to help us with healing those childhood wounds. And maybe in this show notes, since we're short on time, I'll go a little bit more in depth as to how they do that. And also there's an actual inner child formation. So those would be my top two self-healed crystals I've talked about in the past, because the crystal literally healed itself. So that is another one you're going to want to work with, as well as channeler and rainbow. Both channeler and then rainbow inclusions and crystals really help to clear our chakras. So what we're trying to do is to bring in that light through each of those chakras. So you're going to start with those to really open those up, and then bring in your self-healed and your mother and child, as well as your inner child crystals, if you have them, to really help with all this healing that we're going to be working through and all these different traumas and whatnot. How about you, Jillian?
Oh my gosh. Well, I personally have done a ton of inner child work. So these are actually crystals that I'm like, oh, I've got these all in one place. Let me pull them out. So, the first one is actually going to be kunzite. And kunzite, I've got two examples here. So I've got, because I use kunzite a lot. So I have two examples here. So this one is a beautiful kunzite that's a bit lower grade, but still absolutely stunning. And then I actually have, this is like one of my personal gem grade. It's like really saturated.
Beautiful.
So those are my two pieces I work with the most. But kunzite, it's one of the best mothering crystals. And so it's really great for like if you have someone who's about to have a child, or especially for the first time, it can help like with new mothers and all of that. But for this context, it's a really powerful stone for remothering or reparenting yourself, especially if you are not able to get all of the mothering or parenting that you really needed as a child. So it's really supportive in that. It really supports and infuses love, right? With that really like parenting energy to it. So kunzite, I think, is one of the best ones you could possibly use for inner child work. I will also say dioptase is another one.
Wow.
Interestingly, when I began selling crystals, dioptase and shadokite were my two like first buys, like
which are like two very expensive crystals.
Two very expensive, two very rare and like obscure crystals.
So beautiful, yeah.
But I think it's because it's what I really wanted and needed at the time. So dioptase is a stone for specifically like trauma recovery. So the elements in that are also like forgiveness, but really it's when things have happened that have, whether it's big T or little t, things that have really shaped who we are, but maybe not who we're actually supposed to be, in really healing those. So dioptase is one of my favorites.
That's so funny, not to interrupt, but both kunzite and dioptase came into my life like extreme right when I met Rob and my stepson, Quinn.
Oh,
because Quinn was bringing up all the stuff of my childhood. So funny that you say that.
Yes.
Wow. Another one I would recommend, which might be a little bit more common than these like rare or more expensive crystals, is gray or silver moonstone. What I like about moonstone, it's inherently like a very feminine energy, but the gray moonstone or silver, it does have like a little bit of that like older energy, right? It's not like white moonstone. It's not like, rainbow moonstone, right? It's a little bit of like, there's a wisdom to it. It also has a little bit of like shadow energy to it, right? It's not black moonstone, but it's like gray. And I personally have really enjoyed using that for my own light infused shadow work, shall we say. For deep shadow work, obsidian, especially rainbow obsidian, are kind of like the ways to go. But I think shadow work's probably gonna end up being another episode we dive into. But I really enjoy gray moonstone for like the light infused repatterning, shall we say. And then the last one is another like super rare one. Sorry guys. But I will also say, if you aren't able to access these specific crystals physically, calling in the energy of the crystals, especially for these expensive ones, like don't go like spending money you don't have on crystals, seriously. But like either taking quartz, I mean like quartz, I really need you to be the energy of papagoite right now. Or like papagoite, I just need you to be with me right now. I'm calling in your energy. That can still do the trick. It's okay. So, anyway, this is my little papagoite, which was actually a gift from a client. There's a little bit of ahoite there as well. But I know I was like, I opened this and was just floored. So papagoite is very rare. It's like the brother sibling stone to ahoite. But it's a stone of transmuting sorrow into joy, transmuting sorrow into like childlike wonder and like being open again. And especially as we're doing this, like having those reminders, life is amazing. And children naturally have this wonder and this joy, and big T, little t traumas come and often will compartmentalize that or even rob that wonder and that joy. And so papagoite is a really great one for helping us re-embody that again. So those are my picks.
Oh my gosh. Can I just add that what you just said there, that's the whole purpose of the shadow work, the inner child work, is to bring you back to your childlike wonder and awe. That's when we are our true self.
This one.
Yes. Yes. So I love it. I have to get some of that. I'll have to talk to you later.
And inner child actually does the exact same thing. I didn't get like super into it, but it's so awesome. I love it. And then Kris, we still need to ask you two things. One, you have provided a lovely discount for our listeners. Do you want to tell them about that?
Yes. So I'm going to offer to any of the listeners, they just need to mention your podcast, crystallizing Conversations. And it's going to be 25% off,
Wow.
90-minute session. So it's $197 for 90 minutes. I do like that 90-minute because we can really dive into everything and actually get a clearing done at that time and be able to give the person maybe some insight as to what was really underneath it all. So anybody who's listening to this podcast,
that's so generous. I know.
Contact me.
I was like, I'm going to contact you.
You're right.
It's like, I could use some more work. And then lastly, so you've created a really powerful embodiment journey for us. And
yes,
I'm really looking forward to how people respond to this one. But would you share a bit about it?
Yes, one of the most important things, you're clearing energy, but you really need the vessel to be filled with light, right? That's the whole point, is we're really wanting to fill with light. So the chakras need to be open and cleared. And so working with them really enhances this work. So as a gift, I'm going to give an audio meditation in which we bring light in and begin to clear every one of the chakras. And we're going to move into Mother Gaia and bring up her wisdom and bring up all of that as we embody it and also send it out. So I believe that we are the conduits of bringing heaven to earth. And then we then are able to heal this planet with our heart energy. So that the meditation will be about healing you and healing this planet through everything that flows out of you.
And that will be available for purchase on our website, everybody. So make sure and head to crystallizingconversations.com. Thank you so much for being here, Kris. This has been such an amazing, enlightening episode, and we are honored to have had you on here. So thank you for being here.
Oh my gosh, thank you. You guys are so amazing. I love the work you're doing. It's so much fun. And I feel like we could just keep talking.
We really could.
We really
We'll
could.
have another episode with you. Yeah, we'll figure out the topic. And
yes, and my voice will be back to normal by then.
Oh no. Well, I couldn't tell, so you're fine.
Yeah, you could tell. Yeah.
And for those of you listening, if you enjoyed this episode, if you wouldn't mind giving us a rating, if you don't already follow us, make sure to follow us so you get notifications when we have new episodes. We don't have our set schedule is full of new moons, so it's not always on a specific day of the week. It's not always on a specific date. So that's the best way to know when our episodes drop. We are available on Spotify, Apple Play, I think all of them, but definitely those two. If you like to watch the videos, some people are more visual and like to watch. And also then you can actually see the physical crystals as we're holding them up. You can watch us on YouTube. Our episodes are now being updated there as well. We also have our website, which is crystallizingconversations.com, where you can sign up for our membership for bonus episodes. And on Apple, I think we now have it. You can just do it straight through
Apple. Yeah.
And it makes it very convenient for those of you who have iPhones. I have an Android, so I didn't even know this was a thing, but it's there now for your convenience. If you don't follow us on Instagram, please do so. Let us know what you've thought of the episodes as they drop. And also please comment on if you have any thoughts, impressions, if anything impacted you. We'd love to hear that. We'd love to know that we made a difference in this world, as we all want to. And we also are really curious about future topics that you want us to discuss. So make sure to connect with us there. And most importantly, if you enjoyed this, share this with your friends, because we're community oriented.
Yes.
Both of us are 4 lines in human design. So we like community here. So share with your friends. Yay.
What are you in human design?
We both have 4 lines in our profile. So we're both very community.
I have to look.
Yes. So, but Kris, thank you so much for being on here. I hope that this was a fun experience for you. And I'm sure that our listeners are coming away a little bit wiser and a little bit more self-aware. So thank you for sharing your wisdom. We appreciate it so much. And thank you all for listening. Have a great couple weeks.
Thanks, everybody. See you next time.
Bye, everybody.
Bye.
Take care.